Missing Hanukkah, and I feel good, and go further. I want to tie up Hilchos Nidda. Now, I just remind you that we're learning Hilchos Nidda as part of a larger limud of the Toikif of Minhagim. It's very important. Hilchos Nidda has a lot of pratim and a lot of things. They're just trying to understand how our halacha became what it is, and what we're machmer on and what we're not machmer on. And we spent a lot of time with it, but let me just review in 1 minute. First of all, in the Torah, there's a din, many dinim of a woman that would make her tameh. Most of it's in Parshas Mitzorah and Vayikra, and the two main ones that we're dealing with now is Nidda and Zava. And once again, Nidda is a natural, healthy process that a woman is supposed to go through. It might be a pain in the neck for her or for her husband or whatever, but it's not something you want to not happen. That's something you want to happen. So Nidda is the natural cycle of a woman where Hashem gives her and I repeat the biology because it's important, where Hashem gives her a endometrium, which is a sac which can hold the baby, and that's for the purpose of her being able to give birth and be makai in the mitzvah of pru or vu. If she does not become pregnant for whatever reason, so then the endometrium dissolves and leaves the body, and that comes out in a bloody form, and that's called Nidda. So what we're talking about, when we're talking about a Nidda, we're talking about specifically and only one thing. We're not talking about blood per se. There might be simonim of who's a Nidda, who's not a Nidda. We're talking about a woman getting rid of her endometrium, niflois Haber, in order to make room for a new endometrium, meaning the lining of the uterus, so that she could hold a baby. This is called tumah. Didn't work. In other words, the operation didn't work. Let's try again next time. So it has a bit of a tumah. We even see that the uterus is called sometimes a kaver. We see this kind of a connection. It didn't happen. The pregnancy didn't happen. There's another din that the Torah talks about right after it, a pasuk later, which is the din of Zava. Zava Gedola, Zava Ktana. And Zava is something completely different, although it looks the same. But a Zava is not a natural, healthy period. One would want to try to live their whole life and never become a Zava. A Zava is an illness. It's whatever that illness is. I don't know. I'm always skeptical of people that give it, medical names. But it's some sort of an illness, which the Torah told us about, where, again, an isha is moitzidam, but it's usually, the way you'll know she's a Zava and she's not a Nidda, is not by any other symptom except for the fact that in the case of a Nidda is bimei Niddasa, and a Zava is bimei Taharasa. So you with me on this? In other words, bimei Niddasa, we assume she's a Nidda, that's what it is. But if it's not, says the Torah, it says this niggin, if she sees dam and it's not bimei Niddasa, elamai, it's what Chazal called yemei tohar, she shouldn't be seeing any dam during that time. So now we have to go with the halachas of Zava Gedola or Zava Katana, depending on how long she sees for. What's the big difference between a Nidda and a Zava Gedola? This is what we're stelling Zichan. Here, the big difference is as follows, that a Nidda, I'm talking now about Deraisa, a Nidda, this is review, I'm sure everybody knows this already, right? A Nidda is a 7-day ordeal. Period. Meaning, when she becomes a Nidda, appears a Nidda, and if she bleeds for 20 minutes, or for a day, or for 4 days, or 6 days, or 7 days, it takes 7 days to become Tahar. There's no Badikas involved. There's no Shiva Nakiyim involved. There's no anything. She has 7 days from the time that her endometrium begins to release itself from the body. It takes a maximum of 7 days for her to become tar, and she's tar. She goes to the mikveh and she's tar. Everything's simple. relatively simple and logical. Zava, a whole different type of tuma, and by Zava, it doesn't help these 7 days. First of all, a Zava, you can't even begin a purity process until she stops bleeding, and then you have to change her chazaka. So in order to change a chazaka, you have to have hefsek tahara. And then you have to have Shiva Nikiyim to make sure that she's not a Zava, much more machmir. So the big difference is that by a Nidda, it's 7 days altogether, and by a Zava, it's 7 clean days after the Zava. And this is all what it says in the Chumash. I'm not telling you anything different than what it says in the Chumash, except that years later, and here we are today, the Bnei Yisrael, says the Gemara reports, the Bnei Yisrael began to get confused. What did they get confused about? They got confused, like, how do I know? It was before iPhones. So how do I know if this is Yimei Tara or if it's Yimei Zava? And they were Yirei Shamayim and afraid to make a mistake. Do I need to wait 12 days or 13 days, or is it the 7 days? I just don't know. So the Bnei Yisrael, hichmiru al atzmam, says the Gemara, they were machmir on themselves. Let's consider everything to be Zava. So now, as I pointed out last week or 2 weeks or whatever it was, that if you open up the Shulchan Aruch and you have Hilchas Nidda, really it should be Hilchas Zava. Because we don't go with Hilchas Nidda kimat at all. We know it's a Nidda, but we don't look at whether it should be made Tahira or be made Tumasa, or whether it's the first 11 days of the month or the second 20 days of the month. We don't look at it anymore, because you might want to look at it for fertility purposes or for other things like that, but or illness purposes, like why is she bleeding? But from a halachic point of view, or let's say, and here it comes to our Indian, from a minhag point of view, B'nai Yisrael hichmiru al atzman. Yeah.
So Rabbi, if we're talking mostly in Hilchos Zava Gedola, why do we care about Vestos? Isn't Vestos like that's a Nidda concept, right? Like it's a X amount of time, it's regular.
A period.
Yeah.
Period. Right. So the answer is that we don't take the chumras away from Nidda. So basically, we're very machmir. We're machmir kazed. We're machmir kazed. Which I would say is a problem. It's not a problem of abstention, but it's a problem of fertility very often. In other words, the simplest shot, you have that much less time to become pregnant, and during the most fertile time, for many women that are struggling with fertility, in other words, there's a window there. Now we've closed the window so much that there are many women, by the time they go to the mikveh, so they're not at a time where they're going to conceive. So the Bnei Yisrael Aleim Hashalom, which were machmir al atzmam, also made it for many women very, very difficult to have children. And this is why we even bother with the sugya in the world of the Rishonim and the Achronim, because we need to know what the toikev of the Bnei Yisrael Sheichmir al Atzman are, to know, like when the poor woman comes and says, I'm never going to have children according to this mahalach. And we add on, of course, everybody knows the 5 days and then 7 days, and then you're lucky if it's 5 days. What happens if she can't make a hefsek tahara? This is in my life ma'aseh b'chol yom. So if it's a ma'aseh b'chol yom, what we have to understand it. So last time I brought, and this is where we left off, we brought the sefer Galia Masechta. The Rav Gusman in his sefer brings a sefer. He has a whole kuntras on these type of things, and in there he brings that he was mechavein to the Galia Masechta. Who's the Galia Masechta? So the Galia Masechta is a little bit important for me historically. Galia Masechta was the Nevardik Rav. Nothing to do with Nevardik Yeshiva. The Aruch HaShulchan was the Nevardik Rav at the turn of the century, 19th, like 1880 to 1908. Aruch HaShulchan was the Nevardik Rav. At the turn of the earlier century was the Galia Masechta, Reb David min Nevardik. So we're talking about a while ago, a time, earlier than Rabbi Yitzchak Elchanan and many of the poskim. and huge Talmud Chacham and all kinds of stuff. The reason I'm familiar with the Galia Masechta is two reasons. One is what we're learning now, and the other is because he was the famous posek that paskin on the copyright law between the Achim Re'im and other people that wanted to print the Vilna Shas. That's something we should talk about here, because it's obviously also for me a ma'aseh, but it's fascinating what halachic copyright law is, and the makar of the Galia Masechta is the Galia Masechta, and the Galia Masechta of David and Vardik, this is what all the Achrayim bring. And then here in Hilchos Nidda, here's a Galia Masechta where it seems nobody holds of. So we know two things from the whole Sefer on Shail and Juvas and Shas, and here's one we hold of, one we don't. Interesting. One has to do with money. Just what I cynically point out. Comes the Galia Masechta, and I'm going to just shorten it because we already did this long. I just want to bring you up to date. Comes the Galia Masechta, Reb David Midavardik, and he says that, look, he says, let me make it easier, this is his lashon, let me make it easier for Rabbanim that have to paskin on Maris and tell women that they're never going to have children. And let me explain that sof kol sof, this din, the B'nai Yisrael, hichmiru al atzman, like a din of Zava Gedola, even if she's Raya Tipas Dam Kachardol Yoshevash Nikim, meaning that every Nidda has a din of a Zava Gedola. That din, he says, look at the word, says the Galia Masechta Sof Kol Sof, B'nai Yisrael, hichmiru al atzman. So it was a chumrah that they took on, and it was the Chassam Sofer, in a similar time, the Chassam Sofer says that it's a minhag. That's how we got into this to begin with. Sof Kol Sof, it's the minhag Yisrael. So how machmir are we going to be because of a minhag Yisrael? That's the question the Galia Masechta deals with, and he says, L'dati, a minhag is a minhag. It's not a derabanan, it's not a deraisa, it's a minhag Yisrael. And since it's a minhag Yisrael, b'shas hatzorech, if other gedolim, he writes, will go over my chiddush, which is about 12 pages. I just said it in 2 sentences. It will go over my chiddush and be basking with me. He thinks this should be the halacha. So those are the Galia Masechta. So Agav Rav Gusman in a sefer brings this Galia Masechta. He says, Baruch Shekivati, this is the emes. We found the emes. However, it's nicht so pashut. Rav Shlomo Zalman, Minchas Shloima, and here's where I want to show you something. Also busy trying to be mater isha labala. Understand, nobody's looking to get out of Nidda. They're trying to be mater isha labala. And he brings the Galia Masechta, and he says, Mashma Shamid Dvarav, he quotes him, and then he says, Mashma Shamid Dvarav Shemitzadeh Lahakel There's a chumrah of Reb Zera and a chumrah of Rabbi, which I don't want to go into right now. Even though he was such a big man, the Nevardik Rav, you can't be Saimach on this Galia. In any case, he himself wrote that he's saying this Chiddush al Tnaim Yiskablu Advarim Be'enei HaChachamim, that only if the Chacham are maskim to it, and Rav Shlomo Zalman writes, here I am, I'm not maskim. Not maskim. Why are they not maskim? So it comes down to, it brings a raya from the Torah that we're not maskim to this, but he says that we're not masking because the Gemara says that Reb Zera, the Gemara in Brachas, as I keep on quoting, says that Heichadama halacha psuka, that you're not supposed to daven, except when you're clear, not in the middle of a ksais, but in the middle of a halacha psuka, you're not supposed to daven. So he says Kigoin Dina de Reb Zera. That's what the Gemara says. Like the Dina de Reb Zera, that every Nidda has a Din of a Zava Gedola. That's the Din of Reb Zera. That's called halacha psuka. Once it's halacha psuka, there's no going back. That's all. It's halacha psuka. Rav Gusman, not referring to Rav Shlomo Zalman, I'm just telling you a machlekes of contemporary achronim, contemporary gedolim, like this is, so what does that mean? So it's a halacha psuka. Like the only time that we find that you're not allowed to go against a halacha psuka, meaning like no matter what, is it's a drabanan, so right? It's not deraisa. And by a drabanan, you could always say safek drabanan lahakel. So what's the halacha psuka? Halacha psuka is no. We don't say safek drabanan lahakel on this, right? You get me on this? Like really, like what you really get to, every woman who sees is a safek zava, safek nidda. So she's a suffix. So b'deraisa she could table after 7 days. So say safek drabanan lakula. Go to the mikveh and a safek drabanan lakula. So the whole chumrah of Reb Zera is we don't say safek drabanan lahakel. Safek drabanan lakula. Yeah? I never said this before. I just want to make sure. Until the second everything was chazar. So we don't say that. So that's gufa. Why? Because the milig says that we're machmer on it, even though a safek drabanan is lakula. In other words, that's gufa the milig.
Why is there safek drabanan?
Because is she a nidda or is she a zava?
She might be a.
So she'll go to the mikveh after 7 days.
I'm not sure if this dinner deraisa or that dinner deraisa. She's a safek in the deraisa.
No, so the rabbanon were machmer. Oh.
But the whole thing is built on a safek of maybe she's a deraisa.
So that's true. So in other words, that's still called a safek drabanan because she doesn't. Let's say this woman doesn't have a safek. It's b'mei tahira. For me, it's a safek, but she's still bound. So she could, like, if you're really b'mei tumasa, you can have a safek deraisa maybe. But
really less than safek drabanan. Really.
Why?
Because they're not. Because you could clarify their status without being mocked like this. Like
How would you? What do you mean? You mean medically?
No, I mean they had a shiloh. I'm sure that every time they'd ask shiloh, the answer wouldn't always be to be machmer like a zava. Right?
You mean by the time of the B'nai Yisrael?
Right.
They just got tired of asking shilohs or whatever.
Yes, right.
Whatever, something like that.
So it's not like the Rabbanan came along and said this is. It's like,
I'm asking. So what is it? It's a minig.
right, but it's calling it. So for sure.
Now
it's
the problem once you say is a minig, this is really the thesis of all these weeks here. When you say it's a minig, does that make it more machmer? Does it make it more bekel?
Right, but it's not safek doris, it's not safek rabbanan, it's safek minig. Right?
Or a minig. A minig is when you're besafek that you're machmer.
There's no rove that the Zava is mute.
There's no rove that a zava is.
LP rove, the Zava is a mikra. It happens infrequently.
Okay, so it doesn't happen though infrequently that a woman sees dam shaloi bimei toihar. That doesn't happen infrequently. Now that can be. When I went to school, we learned there were 77 different types of dam that comes from a woman. I said I went to school, I mean at the B'datze de Charedas. 77 different colors and types. I learned Maris, how to look at Maris at the 77. What do you say about that?
I did learn 77.
77 different possibilities of dam. Everything going from some kind of a gonorrhea to a petza, and there's different types of sign, It's a funny thing that I just want to say this, because it's minhag, like we do knock it away b'kal. So for instance, when we say, this is all over Shulchan Aruch, Hilchos Nidda, that if we know there's a petza, even though, is this really coming from this petza? Now you see the problem is like women come to ask me, they're way too honest. It's like, nah, it's not coming from this petza. But the Bodeka says there's a petza, but the halacha is that you could be tola on the petza. Why? Not because maybe it is a petza, but as long as there's any kind of a tzliya at all, you could be tola because it's sof kol sof. Not because it's only a minhag. Let's not get it right. Let's not get it wrong. Because that gufa was the minhag. They were never makabel on themselves in such a case. See, I mentioned last time, and I want to just get to this, but if in fact we're machmer kasava k'toila, I asked this question. If we're machmer that every woman who's a nidda is a zava k'toila, so then why doesn't she have to be toivel in a mayon? Remember I asked this question? A zava k'toila has to toivel in a mayon, not a mikvah.
It's not a mikdash.
I thought it was she has to be in a mikvah as well. I think a zav has to be in a mayon, and a zava in a mine.
Like is the Rambam in the Rosh, but we pass in a mayon.
We pass in a mayon.
Yeah. We pass in a mayon. It's not so negay these days, but you learn kosher. We pass in a mayon. So why aren't we machmer mayon? So I think that the answer to that question is that we never said that she's a zava gedolah. That's not what we said. We said that being that she's confused or can get confused, so they said let's be machmer, let's consider everything. It's like lot kosher, let's just consider everything a problem. But it doesn't mean you're a zava gedolah. Just we're machmer in certain things like a zava gedolah.
It really must depend on the case if we're being machmir or not, because if somebody's just within their yemei nida, and that was that, now we're being machmir on them, right? But if somebody actually does have blood outside of the yemei nida, then okay, so now we can say are we being machmir?
So very interesting. We don't even look at it, but nobody looks at it.
One brushstroke, right?
Okay, Rabbanim are not doctors, and not trying to figure out why she's bleeding right now. This is because of B'nai Yisrael L'chmir al Atzma, and that's called the halacha psuka. It was very interesting that yesterday we made a kiddush for Mrs. Robinson. So she's an older from a different generation. So she had lunch in my house. So she's telling me that she was probably listening now. She listens to the halachas of Hilchos Nidda that we're learning over here. So she said she doesn't understand the whole issue. A minig tzibrechta din ala vesendach. In other words, the pashtus hadavar is that a minig is stronger than it did. Now, if you're looking at it like a labdin, I mean, we've all heard that. We've all heard that a minig is stronger than it did. But is it why should it be stronger than it did?
That's the minig.
That's the minig. I can tell you why it should be stronger than it did, because could be a minhag Klal Yisrael. I'm talking about a minhag Klal Yisrael. This gets us back to what we're going to continue talking about with Hashem himself. A minhag could be as a din of a neder, and even more than a neder as a din of nidreit tzibur. Tzibur takes a neder, like a cherem d'Rabbeinu Gershon, that kind of thing. So if it has that kind of a takev of neder, so a neder in fact is more machmir than a din d'Rabbanan, or even many din d'Oraisa. So that's why it came down in history, and that's why I'm saying it. It came down to history, from the Noshim Kanmarniyos that a minig tzibrechta din, and that's all. Like you can't,
But if it was a neder and people would have known that it would cause people not to be able to have children, then maybe they wouldn't have ever taken on the neder.
How do you know that? But Almanas came. But that in itself is what the Galia Masechta says. They never took it on. Just like when we decided to fast after Batal Megillas Tainus, right? We decided to fast anyways on Shivas or B'Tammuz and on Sar B'Tevis. But when we took it on, it was too hard to do a 24-hour fast, so we took it on for the mornings. Right? So this is the Galia Masechta says, Beseder, or B'Kabel the Minig, not to be toivel in a mayan, only under certain situations. So the question is, Hagufa, what's the minig, and what is the minig? That's the question.
It would be called Hilchos Zava. Then
but it's not called Hilchos Zava.
There would be all
that would be the
things.
minig. It's called Hilchos Nidda. In Shulchan Aruch, it's called Hilchos Nidda.
How do we say that there's no Petzah or no Makabel? Who says? It says somewhere they were Makabel.
This is obviously that they were Makabel.
They were not Makabel Petzah. That we can toll on a Petzah. Maybe Makabel that also. That it's Petzah.
So maybe we say in Lachaboy Elachidushay.
I'm saying, where did it come out that you toll on a Petzah, and therefore the whole thing doesn't apply?
Because I think the Rishonim are looking at the opposite of you. Like they're saying that let's be mocked in what they were makabel so that women can have children and be tar l'balam. In other words, you could take the chumrah side and say, well, maybe they were makabel everything, or you could say, no, they were probably makabel very, very little. Exactly this. So that's exactly what the Rishonim are. I was thinking, let me review for you the very famous story about the Chaim Brisker who came home, and his wife was cleaning for Pesach and cleaning the outside, the cement on the way to their house, on the garden. And he said to her, Medarfinish, like, why are you cleaning that cement? And she looks at him and she said, if we leave it to you, we would be eating chametz on Pesach. So Okay, so no, so what you have is like, I would say she won this argument. Meaning Taka the Minig Yisrael is to clean for Pesach, in I don't want to say like they're terrorists, but I mean in a very like mugzam. It's certainly mugzam al pi halacha, but that's our minig, and that's what we do, and finished, and it's good for the hotel industry. Okay, so Reb Shlomo Zalman says, just to make a sikum here, because I keep on getting sidetracked, that he was only machadish this chiddush al t'nai im iskablu hadvarim beinei chacham. Yeah.
Maybe that Pesach cleaning is a great example, because 2 years ago during Corona, there were all these kulas that came out about how you don't have to do X, Y, Z. Because it's only a minhag to do these. Yeah,
we were about. I was petrified because all of a sudden nobody had to toivel kalim anymore. Just all the goy and this and makna and kind or not to mention not go to shul, not be yotzei tefil b'tzibur and take sefer Torah outside and all these things. And I said, what are we ruining the whole Messiah of Klal Yisrael? Does this make sense? It does not make sense. Okay, I understand the pikuach nefesh like you do. I'm not. If it, let's assume it was a pikuach nefesh shayla, but I was personally petrified about the minhagei Yisrael. It was b'koishi gadol that I let people do this tefillas kalim shtick. But everyone, in other words, we found a guy and we did a whole mechiras chametz on the kalim, so that nobody should go to the mikveh and die. Now, okay, everyone's smart. In hindsight, wasn't necessary. That's not my point. My point is that exactly what your point is. That your point is that we see that the fact that it was only a minhag, so to speak, we were mavater on it. Let me say this. I have a couple of minutes. So Rav Shlomo Zalman says he does not like the hatzah of the Galia Masechta, and rather I'll give you a hatzah. This is again for women that are having a fertility problem. And I'm certainly not paskening any halachas here. I'm just telling you the raid. But Rav Shlomo Zalman says, arguing with Rav Gusman, who does like the Galia Masechta, he says he doesn't think it's the right thing. Let's say the history that Rav Kook, Zecher Tzadik Livracha, was a Talmud of the Novardika Rav. That was his base medrash. He learned in Volozhin, but he also learned halacha in that line. There's a whole line you can trace. I do these things to trace from the Novardika Rav in the turn of the 19th century to Rav Kook, and Rav Kook, interestingly, was the first one to bring the Galia Masechta after research. I thought it was Rav Gusman. Rav Kook brings the Galia Masechta and says that you cannot be mekel like the Galia Masechta b'shum oifen. Rav Shlomo Zalman was in the base medrash of Rav Kook. It's a very interesting, it was just the Galia Masechta wasn't on in this base medrash. They weren't makabel. So he says, let me tell you a new chiddush that I have, and this will work. And he calls it Ras Adam b'shveiferes. Ras Adam b'shveiferes refers very importantly, and it's important that we know this clearly, to the Psukim in Mitzorah. No, this is Rav Shlomo Zalman stuff. Rav Shlomo Zalman is what this is called, by the way, the famous Hatzah of Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach and Hilchos Nidda.
Where's the tshuva?
The tshuva is in Mincha Shleima Chelek Beis, Siman Ayin. Here it says, I'm sorry, let me just find the pasuk here. Here, V'isha. This is talking about Nidda, not about Zova. V'isha kisiya Zova dam yeh Zova bivsara. That's a pasuk. Shivas yamim tia bin nidasa v'chol hanageya ba yitma ad ha'areb. So here the Torah is telling us that this is the din nida deraisa. This pasuk I read you that is the din nida deraisa. What's the din nida deraisa? Isha kisiya zavadam. He uses the word zava, but not to get confused. It's talking about nida. Zava means flowing blood. That's all. So isha kisiya zavadam yeh zayva bifsara. What does that mean, Yitzhak? I'm reading with the trop. Isha kisiya zavadam yeh zayva bifsara. She should be. No, help me, somebody. Yazova bivsara. What does it mean? Thank you. Thank you. Huh? The what? Say it. Oh, the Gemara touches up. So the Gemara asks, good. The Gemara says, what do you want? What does Hashem want from us with Zoiva Bivsara? So the answer is that there is an endometrium which is breaking down. And then in the Mafli Lasais of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, there is a way for this endometrium to escape the body, and that is called Bivsara. So it goes from the Beis HaPnimi, as the Gemara calls it, to the Beis HaChitzain, right? It goes from the uterus to the cervix. It goes it goes through this path and comes out. That's how it comes out. And that's called Zava Bivsara. Zova Bivsara. It's coming derech habasar. It seems to be completely insignificant how it gets out. So for instance, but here's the point. Let's say, for instance, I'm just making this up. You would do a surgery and remove the dam nida. This is not such a for instance. This is every time someone has their uterus removed. This is exactly what's happening. Or one of the things that's happening is you're removing the nida mibifnim. So everybody wants to know, I had a hysterectomy, do I become a nida? And the answer is probably not, because there's different types of hysterectomies, but probably not, because you have obviously dam, and obviously have uteral bleeding, but it's not zova bivsara. It's not coming out the normal, natural way. It's coming out like a baby would come out in a C-section. That kind of a thing. Assuming, again, I'm not a doctor, but assuming that that's the procedure that's done. So on this, the Gemara says in Nidda Mem Aleph, exactly what Rabbi said. Amar Reb Shimon v'chimaz bazel l'lamdei. Now, what do we need these extra words? So the Gemara. The wrong Gemara here. There's the Gemara in Nidda here. Bivsara v'loy b'shvayferes v'loy b'shafir v'lo b'chaticha. The dam nida has to happen bivsara, lo b'shvayferes, lo b'shafir v'lo b'chaticha. I'm reading from the Targum. It quotes Rashi here. Now, what does it mean? Shvayferes. There's a lashon Rashi. Im hichnisa kana chalul, v'nimsa b'toichai dam tahira. Rashi says that let's say you would insert an instrument into the woman, and from there you would take, imagine a straw of some sort, and from there you would take the nida, and it would bypass, or is that the right word? It would go through this tubing instead of going through bivsara, the natural process. So in other words, you're getting a clean nida. So the halacha is miloshin bivsara. It has to be bivsara. Sheyatsa derech, says Rashi, koisle beis harechem ve'enoi mafsik. There cannot be a hefsek between the dam that's coming out and the koisle harechem. Why not? There's a kassav. It doesn't make any, as far as I know, it doesn't make any logical sense. There's a kassav that the Torah says bivsara. So bivsara v'loy b'shvayferes. That's what the Gemara says. Comes Reb Shlomo Zalman, okay, says we have an easy thing. Now, let's with the technology available to us and the different materials that are available, right, today there's all types of diaphragms and all kinds of things that can be used. So all you have to do, says Reb Shlomo Zalman, I just read you his first few words before his 20-page proof of this. Afal gav the shekasavnu shagam b'shas hatchak gadol yefshir lahakav lavar al chumer derab zera. You can never go against the chumer derab zera. I have a new takana. To women that need to make their tefillah earlier. Before she knows she's supposed to get a period, she wears shvoferes shel gumi, some type of a rubber device, dak, al pi hamakar, v'yesogar u'mahudak heitev. This is, by the way, extremely doable. This is not science fiction here. Extremely doable. You just basically cap the place where the dam would normally flow through the koislei harechem, and then al pi hamakar, no blood is escaping from there. So therefore, no blood is going into bisara. There's a definite chatzitza. Beef sarah, and you'll have it something like a balloon that the only place where the dam will appear is already outside the rechen. Shafilu tipas dam pachas mikachardo leisucha lotzeis michutz l'shveferes. You'll have a situation. You could create a situation where even a tipas dam kachardo will not touch the besara of the woman. And on the other side, it's over. Nimshachat chutz l'gufa goes all the way out of her body. Right? Going down the block. Mamish boyfriend shekol adam ayosim min haisha lo yiga klal bivsar shebifnim v'shebebeis achitzain eliyasakulei me'amakar ad chutz legufa ach v'rak derech shveferes. And he says here, this is a good takana. By the way, this is the end of his maskana. I'm reading the Akdama, but his maskana is that this is a good idea. When she knows that her period is over, right? Tanagev hetev bezahirus rabba. You have to be very careful that you don't get dam on the basar, because then bam, you have a xeris hakasav that she's aser. So you carefully remove the shofares. He's giving a medical procedure. You remove the shofars, but toitziana migufa, ba'oivin shloyeh shum sel shel safek. There can't be a shadow of doubt. Shemi yotza tipas dam me'ah shofars l'toicha guf. V'chasher yavru zayin yamim. Now listen carefully to this sentence. Kasher yavru zayin yamim mitchilas riyasa. When 7 days go by from the tchilas riyasa, why 7 days? Deraisa. Interesting. Tafsik b'tara, then she should make a hefsik tara, kenida daraisa, v'titbal v'safik b'li bracha b'leil yoim ches, v'tia tahir miyad.
Low bracha.
She's not needed the rice. She's not needed.
Those b'li bracha. Right. Right.
You said that which is that means she's a suffix. She's not a paranida at the point.
Why did she become a nida at all? Why did she have to even go to the mikveh? According to this.
I mean, there's still Riyah, no?
But by the way, when I learned this with a group of doctors in Muncie, which were all endocrinologists or gynecologists in that particular setting, so as I'm talking, they were creating a business model for creating a shofer zagumi.
It's all in theory. There was never such a thing.
Does anybody actually do it?
Yeah.
I don't know. They loved the idea. They were ready to patent it, and Behechsher, Rav Yaacov Haber, Evayated Arthur's, Shuvar's Gumi.
Do poskim more like into this idea versus something like in vitro for couples with that issue? Like what would be preferred halachically?
I mean, in vitro is a fertilization which has all kinds of halachic problems if you're talking about a donor and all kinds of. This is a much easier solution, let's put it that way.
But it doesn't exist.
How do you know?
I'm asking you. That's what I just. Oh, I heard you say. No one does
I don't know. So I mean, he says you should do it.
But nobody does.
How did he know that it was technically possible then not to have an even
I saw someplace that if it wasn't technically possible at the time of Rosh Shlomo Zalman, which was, my time, it's certainly technically possible now. You can have a laboratory clean and not have any problem at all. So,
Especially when you're removing the tube, if the tube has any lachluchas on it, so how could you be certain that it's not touching the basar?
remember, what are we talking about? We're talking about bimei tarasa.
Well, these days you can have.
So midiraisa, you don't need the whole tube and everything. That's why midiraisa, she could just go to the mikveh, 7 days, just go to the mikveh. We're talking about trying to get out of all the halachas of Zava Gedolah. So again, it's a minhag. So for the minhag, we're going back to the bivsar. Now, what's wrong? I mean, what hits you? This is what's important for me. Does this hit you as correct or incorrect? I mean, I'm not talking about kavod HaTorah.
I don't understand how the issue with the minhag goes, though. Like, it's brilliant, but, like, you still have the minhag there. Goes to Israel, there's still a month where
If they saw us, there's no need.
Huh?
What are you saying?
It's based on a you said it was a drasha, or what I'll say is it's the understanding of the pasuk.
Zova bivsara v'loy b'shveiferes,
Right, that's what they
as opposed to a shveiferes.
It's for Zava or Nidda?
Nidda.
But
Nidda.
Zava has the name of touching the. Zava also says not to touch.
So as far as I know, I'm not 100% baki in Hilchos Zava, but as far as I know, that all the chumras of Nidda go on Zava. Zava is Nidda plus. So
If they saw right? So that mean they couldn't see it either.
in Rasa, Tipas Dam Kacharda.
Right, so they'd still see the
They see it, of course they see it, yeah. See it and you dispose of it.
So it still kicks in, but that's not considered down either.
Yeah, it's not done. Like, in other words, the proposition here is on the table that can it be, it's a brain twister, I want you to know.
Right.
Can it be Dam Nida? As I was Rav Shlomo Zalman, the Goin, like it was the Goin of the generation. So he says that, the poor women, infertility, I have a Gemara, and let's do this. Get to work manufacturing this. It's better than a grumma switch on Shabbos and things like that, right? I don't know. I know it's. I don't know. I just know. I don't know why not. So I just want to read you. I'm sorry, 1 minute over, but I'm just going to take 1 minute. This Sefer Imre Chaim is Rav Scheinberg. Probably his least known Sefer and most important one. It's on Hilchos Nidda, first Sefer. And the device story that I might have told last week is when I went to Rav Shlomo Zalman as a shlichus Rav Scheinberg to get ksavim on the Shav Shmaitza, and Rav Shlomo Zalman told me that when he wrote this tshuva of Shveiferes, he didn't know Rav Scheinberg at that time, but when he wrote this tshuva of Shveiferes, he got so much mail and complaints, and even Cherem and withdraw it. Everyone went, the Badat, the Charidis, everyone went berserk about the Nidda b'Shveiferes. Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach. So nobody is. In other words, what did everyone get so excited about? Because what are you going to do? You're getting rid of the whole institution of Hilchos Nidda. No, but it's more than that. So that's you do this thing and you never become a Nidda. Like, you can get rid of the whole thing according to this, even though he says it's for women and fertility.
So the Galim Masechta, it could be building on the Galim Masechta. He's like one step above the Galim Masechta.
After he slugged up the Galim.
I'm saying yes, the Galim Masechta is acceptable, I guess, and that's 7 days. She waits 7 days.
No.
So he's not really.
So everyone got all excited, and he told me, Rav Shlomo Zalman told me himself. He says, and they got a letter from a kuntrus from an unknown rabbi in America, so a younger man in America, as he called him, and he said to his son, Rav Shmuel Auerbach, he says, okay, we have to go through this carefully. So that was a letter from Rav Scheinberg, which was printed in here, to Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, which is also a 20-page Mar Mekaymis and Miris and Rons going back and forth. But I just want to say this, that he says, just one sentence and then I'll let you learn. He brings a Rav Shlomo Zalman Reisi ben Noam. He didn't see it in here, Rav Steinberg. He saw it in a periodical called Noam. It's like a rabbinic periodical. The Kuntras Aruch v'nifla binyan hatzal takonas nashim binyane nida me'agoyin hametzuyin harav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach Shlita. V'achrei haricha sham bala maskana, that he comes to the maskana shenuch lahater leisha b'malka mitzvahs periyurivya the shvoferes. And before all of this, his reaction is, Hine yadua kamadagu chazal shalei lesser isha al bala. You feel like we know how much Chazal never made an extra chumrah that women should not be usher to their husbands. V'kilu b'roya machmas tish tashmish le'asher al bala. We by a petza we just spoke about where Mekel. So he says mashagufa eitza. I'm sorry. V'im hayashum eitza la'atzilu mizah. If this would have been a good eitza. If this would have been an eitzah, Makar Shenestra Lo'ilam, Bevadei Hayim Ashmienu Zevalei Hayu Seisman is Divrain. So this is like a funny kind of a kasha, like why is he the first one in history to think of this? Chazal came up with every different idea of how to be Mekel Isha Labala, some of it very, very far-fetched, and nobody says, why don't you try the Shvoferes method?
Did this happen before?
So I'm going to tell you in one sentence because I'm over time. There's Rav Steinberg that when Chazal said Nidda b'Shvoferes, that was before the din of Reb Zera. Chazal said it, but once, which I think you said, once Chazal were makabel the din of Reb Zera k'halacha psuka, that B'nai Yisrael ichmir al atzman, it includes Shvoferes also, meaning all of these drushes in the psukim. He says it's koydem Reb Zera. You see such a yesodistic machlokes. He says Reb Zera's halacha did away with this. No more being befalpel and hilchos zava. No more. What the women said is no more complications or muster, and that's all. That was.
A lot of times the Mishnah were so concerned with making women live with their husbands, but then Reb Zera decided that no, we should no longer let it go.
I guess so. Otherwise, they wouldn't have been asked to Tipas Dab Kachardol and Yoshev Shai in the Kiev. So we were for whatever reason. We maybe we spoke about, maybe we won't speak about, but for whatever reason, we're makabel to the Reb Zera. But the yesodistic machlokes, which comes out Ibrei Chayim and Bidcha Shloimeh, but it's probably such a yesodistic machlokes, is this before the din of Reb Zera or after the din of Zera? The inner machlokes is, and what was the din of Reb Zera anyway? Was it a din, Safek D'Rabbanan L'Chumra, Minhag? What kind of minhag did it go through the Anshe Knesset Agdolah? Did it not go through the Anshe Knesset Agdolah? So his argument, the Rishiva's argument is, it's Judaism. After the din of Reb Zera, that became Yiddishkeit. And once it's Yiddishkeit, there's no going back. Beis HaMikdash will come, Mashiach will come. These things won't change because this is how Yiddishkeit, forgive my word, evolved into the Minhag Yisrael, and there it will stay. Now, I'm certainly not taking a side between this and this, but I could just say that Rav Shlomo Zalman told me, okay, you'll have to reconsider. Now, in the Noam, he says it is a Hatzah Gemura. Over here, he says at the end, he says Gedolim argued with me. This is at the end. Gedolim argued with me, and I'm not saying this l'maisa. I believe I heard that in the Bnei Banim, which is Rav Yehuda Herzl Henkin, Ova Shalom. So that's Rav Henkin's grandson, maybe more in the Mekel world. So he prescribed this l'maisa. Kach shamati. I didn't see it inside in the Bnei Banim. But that's what I heard. So it can have a very big l'maisa, but I'm not so interested in l'maisa as I am. Look, I'm not getting into the Shvoferes business. I'm just saying that like this opens our head to the of how Yiddishkeit becomes what it is, and what the tokef of a Minhag Yisrael sebrechta din, that these B'nai Yisrael became like a Maisa of Yiddishkeit, a Maisa Davar Shebaminyan, and there's no going back. I have to go. Thank you very much for letting me go over time.